Can you talk a bit more about zakat and some of the Islamic measures that Islam puts in place in order to create a better society? What are the principles of Islamic economics?
Because a lot of people think it's just interest-free banking, but actually it's much broader than that, really, isn't it? There's a lot of other aspects to it.
Yes. Look, it's well known for the prohibition of usury because it's perhaps the last community that's standing firm on it. Even though you can see prohibitions on usury in the Christian texts, in the Jewish scriptures, even in some of the Hindu scriptures.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, it's true. I've seen.
Well,
I've been
it's
shown.
not actually surprising.
That's not surprising.
I wouldn't be surprised because one of the things about these major prohibitions is that they've been outstanding for many eons, and therefore it's quite likely that previous prophets relayed that fact to their communities.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the one which we kind of stand out on because we're standing firm on that, and the Islamic banking experiment has meant to embody that.
Yeah,
that's what it was designed or hoped that it would do. Now, if you look beyond that, there is a very deep body of contract law in Islamic finance which addresses matters of trade, matters of investment, matters of charity. And those three contract types, exchange, when I buy and sell something, investments, where I give you money on the basis that we share profits and losses, charity, where I give you a gift, for example, or where I set up a waqf, an endowment. Those laws and rules have worked together to ensure that where they have been implemented and enforced by a just ruler, you have seen actually a magnificent blossoming of society. Of course, we mustn't look back with rose-tinted spectacles at everything, but it's undoubted that to propel a group of Arabian Bedouins to dominance of half the world within a couple of hundred years, there must have been some very powerful and strong and just system to enable that to happen. There was a flowering of academia, of art, military flowering, of course, which you have to have if you're going to establish an empire, trade, thought, writing. All of this blossomed, and that was on the basis of justice. And if you look in the laws of financial contracts and contract law and Islamic law, you will see the basic requirements of that, and prohibition of theft, the prohibition of fraud, the prohibition of usury, the requirement for profit sharing and loss sharing, the way in which endowment assets are treated, the way in which gifts are treated, I can't describe it all in a few minutes, but the thing is that there's a very deep and cogent body of law. Now, you don't find that in other bodies of religious law. I think I'm fairly confident in saying that. You just don't find it. You don't see Christian financial contract law. You don't see the hadith of Jesus, for example, the sayings of Jesus, in the detail and in the number and how profound and how many they are as you get in the Islamic.
Yeah, there are whole books. The book on economic contracts, and there's thousands of hadith.
If it does exist in Hinduism or Buddhism, then I'd like to see it because no one has shown.
And
I do ask.
It is an extraordinary thing in a way, because in a way the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was perfectly positioned. He was in a mercantile capitalist society. And so that's the environment within which Islam flowered in a way. And so that also gave an opportunity to early Islam to address these questions.
It did.
By divine providence from our view, perhaps by other people's view by chance. But
whatever the case, there is a body of law.
Absolutely,
and, one needs to look at that law as a Muslim and understand how to implement it in the modern context, because things have changed. We're no longer in a Bedouin society in the 7th century. And that is why you have debates about how things will pan out, in terms of the way we regulate them, the way we look at them in the Islamic banking and finance sector, or just in our personal level. People at home will be asking, how do I pay zakat in the modern context? Is it due on my share portfolio? Is it, for example, they will ask questions like that. Now, I think there is a matter of the source evidence, and there is the matter of the interpretation. And of course, the interpretation that's where arguments can come, and we can talk about that. But as for the laws themselves, they address the issues of the modern world in a very profound way, I believe. For example, you can turn on the television today and you can see adverts for gambling practically on every break, a football match in particular. And this is something which is so deeply destructive to society.
It is.
So, I mean, to take that and look at it, the issue of qarar, the contract of uncertainty, of which gambling is the ultimate example, probably, that I bet you that Manchester United win and you bet me that Liverpool win a football match, based on an uncertain future outcome. You either give me money or I will give you money. There's no creation of wealth there. It's just a transfer of wealth. And I have argued quite strongly, I think, that a society which makes money out of transferring existing wealth, because of this entropy factor that wealth rots, we have to repair our houses, we have to make new clothes, we have to grow new food. And if we don't create new wealth, but instead transfer wealth, oh, Liverpool won, here's my 100 quid. Oh, Manchester United won, here's 100 quid of mine. Right? If we don't create new wealth, but just engage in activities that transfer existing wealth, then our society will eventually fall.
Yeah.
Because we will not create the wealth that we need to repair our houses and repair our roads, and let alone cater for the new people who are being born.
Yeah. So not only is it actually just transferring wealth, but it's also doing so at the profit of the people who are running the gambling businesses.
Yes, again, so they are setting up this huge infrastructure for running gambling, which doesn't benefit humans.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the body of Islamic contract law and you see that this is prohibited, this gambling contract on a legal basis, which is very detailed in the source evidence. It's not a matter of interpretation in terms of the source evidence. It's very clear that this kind of gambling contract is prohibited. Then to implement that today, I would say that gambling maybe would release another 5% of the resources of the country towards useful things. Usury, if we were to prohibit usury, we would release another 20-30%, if Stiglitz is right, of resources to the benefit of society. And these prohibitions on drugs, for example, or whatever it might be, if you take away things that are prohibited from society, then many of the questions that people ask about the problem with the economy and how can we have more wealth to do the things we want to, many of those questions simply disappear, because we'd find that we are devoting our activities as a nation to things that are productive and useful. And that is the direction in which Islamic financial contract law goes. It helps to channel the efforts and work of society into things that benefit people, that are not fraudulent, that are not merely parasitic or transferring wealth from one to another, but are actually benefiting society.
One thing that I wanted to mention, or ask you about rather, is Zakat. You've mentioned it already as a wealth tax. So it's something, for example, that Bernie Sanders advocated in the previous election cycle, that they should have a wealth tax in the United States. Elizabeth Warren did as well.
Yeah. And Piketty.
Piketty, Piketty. Him also. So the what that is, is from what I understand, is it's not an income tax. It's a tax on existing assets at a rate of 2.5, or in Islam it would be 2.5%, but it could vary anyway, even in Islamic society.
And cash balances.
And cash balances which are unused for a year.
It's a marginal wealth tax.
It's a marginal wealth tax, yes. It's a marginal wealth tax. And the Islam and the Quran in particular, it specifies that the wealth from zakat should be funneled towards certain classes of people. So far from an actual fact in a system of gambling or a society where the transfer of wealth actually is to the detriment of the ordinary person, the idea in Islam, from what I understand, if you correct me on this, is that it's taking existing pools of money which is locked away and which is not currently being involved in economic activity, but is forcing it to be recirculated, especially amongst the needy, to increase money velocity. And if you could talk to me about money velocity in particular, something that's so important, I think, people don't understand, is that is the key to actually wealth generation, which is what you've just talked about.
Yes, one of the keys is that if rich people have money, they tend not to spend it so much. If poor people have money, they need clothes, they need food, they need to repair their homes. So
marginal propensity to consume.
Yes, the marginal propensity to consume is near to 1. In other words, for every £1 they get, they tend to spend the £1 pretty quickly. So that funneling of idle wealth into expenditure on essentials is one way that the economy can be encouraged to divert resources to needed areas, not to gambling services, but to repairing this poor guy's home or his roof, or buying clothes for his daughter or whatever, right? And yes, definitely that has an impact. And I think then if you take what you're saying about zakah, and you combine it with the profit and loss sharing issues of where financiers invest in people who are poor as well as people who are rich, depending on their ideas. Good ideas are promoted. Capital is fed to poorer people. Capital from zakah is fed to poorer people again. And you can see that this, idea of wholeness and bringing the community together and giving everybody a slice of the pie becomes very clear. It's not like a legal principle, but it is an outcome of the legal principles.
Yeah. And in a way, it's an anti-interest. It's like the negative of interest, isn't it? Because interest actually funnels money to the rich who sit on it and it's idle. So interest in actual fact increases the proportion of wealth that is idle, whereas zakat naturally decreases the proportion of wealth that's idle.
Yeah, we actually have an article on that on rationalism.co.uk on which specifically makes that point about zakat and its difference with interest by Daniel Arif. And I would just say, what you said, people may think you are just kind of saying it off your own back there in terms of the money circulating, but you are essentially paraphrasing an actual direct quote of the Holy Quran.
Yeah, it is. It says, the spoils of war are not only for those among you who are rich. I'm paraphrasing. We can put the verse up or in the link below. But it's to be spent on certain classes of individuals, and the Quran specifically says so that it may not circulate amongst only of those of you who are rich.
Yeah, and the classes of the downtrodden is the kind of the orphans, the needy,
the orphans, the needy, the poor, the traveller, the prisoners of war.
Yeah.
People like that. So I think, that's an aspect of Islam which I think is completely forgotten. And when Piketty talks about it, or Elizabeth Warren talks about it, or Bernie Sanders talk about it, they never actually realize that actually the root of that is ultimately has, in our modern day at least, in the last 1,000 years, it's been in Islam.
Well, they may know of it. they may not.
They're definitely not going to say it.
Well, you smiled at the Piketty thing, and I think some of our viewers may be wondering why. Can you briefly?
I don't want to say. Piketty and I have had some email correspondence, and I pointed out this matter of him utilizing zakat as and saying that he is proposing the wealth tax for the first time. And I've pointed out that Islam has a 1,400 year history of proposing zakat. And to his credit, he said, "Send me the literature." And I did, and he sent me an email back saying, "Thank you. I appreciate the time taken, and this reading material is very interesting." So he certainly did engage with a lowly person like myself. So I'm very grateful to his email correspondence.